All stories posted on our channel are stories from our subscribers and created by us based on real events we've experienced and witnessed. We post new stories every day for your entertainment, that we hope you enjoy them. Thank you.
The kitchen was silent except for the ticking of the clock above the stove, a clock we had purchased together during our honeymoon in Vermont, back when the future seemed boundless and our love felt unbreakable. I was standing at the counter, preparing dinner as I did every evening, when Juliana walked through the door with the particular energy that always preceded her worst moods. My name is Tobias Merrick. I was 42 years old, a high school English teacher in suburban Philadelphia, and until that Thursday evening in late November, I had believed that words, despite their power to wound, could never truly destroy a marriage that had endured 14 years of challenges and triumphs. I was wrong. "You're still here," Juliana said, dropping her designer bag on the kitchen island with a thud that seemed louder than it should have been. "Still doing the same thing you do every day, cooking dinner like some kind of housewife while the world passes you by." I set down the knife I had been using to chop vegetables, my movements careful and controlled. "I'm making that pasta dish you like, the one with the—" "I don't care about the pasta, Tobias." Her voice carried an edge I had been hearing more frequently for the past year, a sharpness that seemed designed to cut rather than communicate. "I care about the fact that my husband is a 42-year-old teacher making $60,000 a year, while my colleagues' husbands are partners at law firms and executives at tech companies." The comparison wasn't new. Juliana had been making it with increasing frequency since her promotion to senior vice president at her marketing firm 6 months ago. Her salary had surpassed mine years before, but the promotion had widened the gap into a chasm that she seemed determined to remind me of at every opportunity. "I love my job," I said quietly. "I make a difference in students' lives. That matters to me, making a difference." She laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "That's what people say when they can't make money. You know what matters, Tobias? Success. Achievement. Being someone that people respect. I thought you respected me." "I thought so too. But lately I look at you and I see—" She paused, her eyes scanning me with an expression that made me feel like a specimen under examination. "I see someone who settled. Someone who gave up on ambition and called it contentment. Someone who—" "Juliana, stop." The words came out more firmly than I intended. "We've had this conversation before. I chose teaching because it fulfills me. I didn't give up on any. You gave up on being someone I could be proud of." The words landed like physical blows, each one striking a different vulnerable spot. I stood motionless, the half-chopped vegetables forgotten, trying to understand how we had arrived at this moment. "Is that really how you feel?" I asked. "It's how I've felt for a long time. I just didn't have the courage to say it." "Courage? You mean the cruelty?" Juliana's expression flickered, something that might have been guilt passing briefly across her features before hardening back into the contemptuous mask she had been wearing. "Call it whatever you want, but someone had to say it. You're useless, Tobias. You're trash. You contribute nothing to this marriage except cooking dinner and grading papers. My mother was right. I should have married someone with ambition." The clock on the wall ticked. The vegetables sat on the cutting board. The pasta water, which had been approaching a boil, began to overflow onto the stove with a hissing sound that seemed to echo the burning sensation in my chest. "Your mother said that?" I managed. "She's been saying it for years. I just didn't want to listen. But she was right. About everything." I turned off the stove, my movements mechanical, operating on autopilot, while my mind struggled to process what was happening. 14 years. We had been married for 14 years, had weathered financial difficulties and health scares and all the ordinary challenges that marriages face. I had believed, had truly believed, that beneath whatever surface tensions existed, our foundation was solid. But you can't build anything on a foundation of contempt. And the contempt in Juliana's voice wasn't new. I was only now recognizing that it had been there for years, accumulating in small doses until it reached a concentration strong enough to be openly expressed. "I need to go for a walk," I said. "Of course you do. Running away from problems, just like always." "I'm not running. I'm creating space so I don't say something I'll regret." "What could you possibly say that would matter? You're a high school teacher, Tobias. Your words don't carry weight in the real world." I walked past her without responding, grabbing my jacket from the hook by the door. The November air was cold against my face, a sharp contrast to the heat of humiliation and anger that burned inside me. I walked without destination, my feet carrying me through the suburban streets I had walked 1,000 times before, past houses where other families were presumably having ordinary Thursday evenings, eating dinner, watching television, living lives uncomplicated by the sudden revelation that their spouse considered them worthless. The words echoed in my mind, playing on repeat like a song I couldn't escape. "You're useless. You're trash." The woman I had loved for 14 years, had supported through her career struggles, had celebrated with through her successes, had believed in even when she didn't believe in herself, that woman had looked at me and seen garbage. I found myself at the small park where I sometimes brought coffee on weekend mornings, sitting on a bench that overlooked a pond now reflecting the gray November sky. The cold seeped through my jacket, but I didn't care. The physical discomfort was nothing compared to the emotional devastation that was slowly settling into my bones. What do you do when the person who is supposed to love you most tells you that you're worthless? When the partner you've built your life around reveals that they've been harboring contempt for years? When every sacrifice you've made, every compromise you've accepted, every dream you've deferred is dismissed as evidence of failure rather than love? I sat on that bench for over an hour, watching the light fade from the sky, feeling the temperature drop, thinking about the life I had built. Life Juliana apparently wished I had built instead. And somewhere in that cold hour of reflection, something shifted. Not a decision exactly, but a recognition, a clarity that had been missing for years. I was not useless. I was not trash. I was a man who had chosen a meaningful career over a lucrative one, who had prioritized fulfillment over status, who had given 14 years to a marriage that I now realized had been slowly poisoning me with its unspoken expectations and concealed disappointments. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I returned to the house after midnight, having walked for hours through streets that grew progressively less familiar. My legs ached, my face was numb from the cold, and my mind had cycled through every possible response to what Juliana had said, from confrontation to capitulation to every option in between. The house was dark when I entered. Juliana had apparently gone to bed without waiting up, without wondering where I was, without caring when I returned at all. The pasta ingredients sat where I had left them, the vegetables now wilted on the cutting board, the pot of water long since cooled. I cleaned up the kitchen in silence, my movements precise and deliberate. The routine was soothing, something I could control when everything else felt chaotic. As I worked, I thought about the students I had taught over 20 years, the lives I had influenced, the letters I had received from former students thanking me for making a difference. Were those accomplishments worthless? Was a career devoted to education and mentorship truly something to be ashamed of? No. The answer was clear and unambiguous. I had made choices that aligned with my values, had built a career that gave me purpose, had lived according to principles that prioritized meaning over money. If Juliana couldn't respect those choices, the problem was with her values, not my worth. I slept in the guest room that night. The first time in our marriage I had voluntarily separated myself from our shared bed. The room was cold and unfamiliar, but it provided something I desperately needed: distance. The morning brought no resolution. Juliana was already dressed for work when I emerged from the guest room, her appearance polished as always, her expression unreadable. "You didn't come to bed," she said, stating the obvious with no apparent emotion. "I thought some space would be good." Space. She repeated the word as if testing it. "Is that what we need now? Space?" "I don't know what we need, Juliana, but what happened last night can't just be ignored. I said things I shouldn't have said. I was stressed from work. Can we just move past it?" The casual dismissal was stunning. She had called me useless, called me trash, had revealed years of concealed contempt, and now she wanted to move past it as if it were a minor disagreement about where to eat dinner. "No," I said. "We can't just move past it." "Why not? People say things in anger all the time." "You said you've felt this way for years. That your mother has been saying these things for years. That wasn't anger. That was truth you've been hiding." "Tobias, you're overreacting." "Am I? How should I react when my wife tells me I'm worthless? When she says I contribute nothing to our marriage? When she reveals that she's been ashamed of me for years?" Juliana's expression shifted, a flicker of something that might have been regret crossing her features. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did. You meant every word. And now I have to figure out what to do with that information." "What do you mean, figure out what to do?" "I mean that I need to think about whether this marriage is something I want to continue." The words hung in the air between us, heavier than anything either of us had said before. Juliana's face went pale, her composure cracking for the first time. "You're not serious." "I've never been more serious in my life. Tobias, we've been married for 14 years. You can't throw that away because of one bad conversation." "One bad conversation? Juliana, you told me I was trash. You told me my career, my 20-year career devoted to educating young people, was worthless. You told me you were ashamed to be married to me. That's not a bad conversation. That's a revelation of how you actually feel." I was exaggerating. People exaggerate when they're upset. "Your mother has apparently been saying the same things for years. You didn't exaggerate that." Juliana was silent, her expression shifting from defensive to something more vulnerable. For a moment I saw the woman I had married, the woman who had been ambitious, yes, but also kind, also capable of seeing value in things that couldn't be measured in dollars. I need to think, I said, not just for a day or a week. I need real time to figure out whether this marriage is still something that serves both of us. And what am I supposed to do while you think? Whatever you want. You've made it clear that my opinions and contributions don't matter, so do whatever you would do if I weren't. I went to work that day, taught my classes with the professional competence that 20 years had made automatic, and tried not to think about the conversation that awaited me when I returned home. But the day provided unexpected clarity. Surrounded by students who looked at me with respect, who valued my guidance, who saw in me a teacher rather than a disappointment, I remembered what it felt like to be appreciated. This was what I had been missing. Not money, not status, but simple appreciation. The acknowledgement that what I contributed had value. Juliana hadn't given me that in years. I had been so busy trying to earn her approval that I hadn't noticed its absence. When I returned home that evening, I made a decision. I packed a bag with enough clothes for a week, gathered the essential items I would need, and wrote a note that I left on the kitchen counter. I'm taking some time away. I'll be at the cabin in the Poconos. I need to think clearly, and I can't do that here. I'm not abandoning our marriage. I'm trying to figure out if there's anything left worth saving. Please don't contact me unless it's an emergency. I'll reach out when I'm ready. I drove into the gathering darkness, toward the small cabin we had purchased years ago as a vacation property, but rarely used. Juliana had always preferred beach resorts to mountain retreats, so the cabin had become my sanctuary, a place I visited alone when I needed solitude. Now it would serve a different purpose, the space where I would decide whether my marriage could survive what had been revealed, or whether 14 years would end in the recognition that love, without respect, was never really love at all. The cabin was exactly as I had left it 3 months ago, slightly musty, cold, but welcoming in its simplicity. I built a fire in the stone fireplace, unpacked my few belongings, and stood at the window watching the last light fade from the November sky. The solitude was immediate and profound. No television, no phone calls, no conversations about quarterly earnings or marketing strategies, or any of the topics that had come to dominate our household discussion. Just the crackling of the fire, the creaking of old wood, and the vast silence of the Pennsylvania mountain. I spent the first day doing nothing productive. I sat by the fire, walked the trails behind the cabin, cooked simple meals I ate without tasting. My mind was too full for focused thought. I needed to let the chaos settle before I could examine it clearly. By the second day, clarity began to emerge. I thought about how our marriage had changed over the years. In the beginning, Juliana had admired my dedication to teaching. She had called it noble, had been proud of my commitment to making a difference. When had that admiration transformed to contempt? When had she started seeing my career as a limitation rather than a choice? The answer, I realized, was gradual. It had happened incrementally, each small shift imperceptible on its own, but cumulative in effect. Her promotions had changed how she saw the world, surrounding her with people who measured success in dollars and status symbols. She had absorbed their values without recognizing the process, and those values had slowly poisoned her view of me. But that wasn't entirely fair. Juliana had made choices. Yes, but so had I. I had accepted her growing dismissiveness without confrontation, had accommodated her shifting priorities without asserting my own, had allowed the erosion of respect because challenging it felt too difficult. We had both contributed to where we were. The question was whether we could both contribute to something different. I called my brother Nathan on the third day. He lived in Boston with his wife and 3 kids, and we hadn't talked in months, despite my intentions to stay connected. Tobias? His voice was surprised. Is everything okay? I'm at the cabin. Juliana and I are having some problems. What kind of problems? I told him about the conversation, about Juliana's words, about my decision to take time away. Nathan listened without interruption, his silence on the line somehow supportive, rather than awkward. That's brutal, he said when I finished. I knew you guys were having some tension, but I didn't realize it was that bad. Neither did I. Or maybe I did, and didn't want to admit it. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. That's why I'm here, to figure it out. For what it's worth, I think you're one of the best people I know. Whatever Juliana said, it's not true. You're not useless, and you're definitely not trash. The words, simple as they were, brought tears to my eyes. Thank you. I needed to hear that. You shouldn't need to hear it from me. You should hear it from your wife. I know. That's part of what I'm trying to figure out, whether she's capable of saying it and meaning it. We talked for another hour, covering topics we had avoided for too long. Our parents' health, Nathan's struggles with work-life balance, the distance that had grown between us as adults. The conversation was healing in ways I hadn't anticipated, reminding me that I had a life outside my marriage, connections that existed independently of Juliana. That evening, I started writing. Not a journal exactly, but a document attempting to capture everything I was thinking and feeling, an attempt to externalize the chaos so I could examine it more objectively. I wrote about my love for teaching, about the moments that had made 20 years feel worthwhile, the struggling student who had finally grasped a difficult concept, the letter from a former student thanking me for believing in her, the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had made a difference in lives that would continue long after my own ended. I wrote about my marriage, about the early years when Juliana and I had been partners rather than competitors, when we had celebrated each other's successes without measuring them against external standards. I wrote about the changes I had noticed but not confronted, the distance that had grown between us, the conversations we should have had, but hadn't, and I wrote about my own failures, the ways I had contributed to our current situation. I had been passive when I should have been assertive. I had accommodated her needs while neglecting to communicate my own. I had assumed that love would sustain us through challenges that actually required active work to overcome. By the end of the week, I had filled an entire notebook with thoughts that ranged from analytical to emotional to philosophical. The writing hadn't provided answers, but it had clarified the questions. Did Juliana respect me? No, or at least, not in any way that mattered. Could she learn to respect me? Possibly, but only if both of us were willing to do significant work. Did I want to try? This was the question I couldn't answer yet. I extended my stay at the cabin for another week, knowing that the decision I was trying to make deserved more time than I had given it. Whatever I chose would shape the rest of my life, and I refused to let urgency or pressure push me toward an answer I might regret. Juliana's first call came on day 3. I let it go to voicemail, as my note had requested, but I listened to her message immediately. Tobias, this is ridiculous. You can't just disappear and leave a note like some dramatic teenager. We need to talk about this like adults. Call me back. Her tone was annoyed rather than apologetic, the voice of someone inconvenienced by circumstances rather than someone worried about a marriage in crisis. I didn't call back. The second call came on day 5. This message was different. It's me again. I'm starting to get worried. The house feels strange without you here. Please just let me know you're okay. The third call, on day 7, was different still. Tobias, please. I know I said terrible things. I know I hurt you, but I can't stand this silence. I need to know that we're going to be okay, that we can fix this. I listened to each message, but didn't respond. Part of me wanted to reach out, to ease her obvious distress, to fall back into the patterns that had characterized our relationship for years. But another part, a part that was growing stronger with each day of solitude, recognized that responding too quickly would undermine whatever boundary I was trying to establish. If this marriage was going to survive, it couldn't be on the same terms as before. I couldn't return to a partnership where my contributions were dismissed, where my career was a source of shame, where love existed alongside contempt. Something fundamental had to change. On day 10, Juliana's mother called. I hadn't expected this, and the surprise made me answer despite my intentions. Tobias. Lucinda's voice was cold, clipped, the same voice she had used throughout my marriage whenever she spoke to me. What exactly do you think you're doing? I'm taking some time to think about my marriage. Your marriage? You mean the marriage my daughter sacrificed her 20s for? The marriage she supported through your mediocre career while building an actually impressive one of her own? Is that how you see it? It's how everyone sees it. Juliana could have married anyone. She chose you, God knows why, and this is how you repay her? By abandoning her when she needs support? She doesn't need my support. She made that very clear. She told me I was useless and that my contributions didn't matter. She was venting. Women do that. You're supposed to understand that and be the bigger person. The bigger person? She called me trash, Lucinda. She said she was ashamed to be married to me. How exactly am I supposed to be the bigger person when my wife holds me in contempt? Lucinda was silent for the first time I'd ever successfully challenged her dismissive attitude. You're being dramatic. No, I'm being clear. For the first time in 14 years, I'm being clear about what I will and won't accept. And being told that I'm worthless is something I won't accept. So you're just going to throw away 14 years of marriage over some words spoken in frustration? Words matter, Lucinda. You should know that. You've been speaking them to Juliana for years. She told me what you've said about me, about our marriage, about her mistake in choosing me. Your contempt has been feeding hers for over a decade. I was trying to help her see what? That she married beneath her? That my career as a teacher was something to be ashamed of? That she should be embarrassed to have a husband who chose meaning over money? You're twisting my words. I'm reflecting them back, and I'm telling you something that maybe no one has ever told you. Your opinion of my worth doesn't define it. Juliana's opinion doesn't define it either. I know who I am and what I've accomplished, and I refuse to be diminished by people who measure value exclusively in dollars. I ended the call without waiting for her response. My hands were shaking. I had never spoken to Lucinda that way, had always absorbed her subtle and not so subtle criticisms without challenge. The confrontation felt like a release, a breaking of chains I hadn't recognized I was wearing. That evening, I called Juliana. Tobias. Her voice was a mixture of relief and caution. Thank God. I was starting to think you'd never call. I needed time. I know. I understand. Can we talk? Really talk. Not just me leaving voicemail. That's why I'm calling. We talked for 2 hours. The most genuine conversation we had had in years. Juliana apologized. Properly this time, acknowledging that her words had been unfair. She talked about the pressure she had been feeling at work, the insecurity that accompanied her success, the fear that people were constantly evaluating whether she belonged. I took it out on you, she said. I was feeling inadequate, and instead of dealing with that, I tried to make you feel inadequate too. It was wrong. It was. But it was also honest. The things you said, you've been thinking them for a long time. The anger just made you say them out loud. Some of them, not all of them. The trash comment, I don't actually think that. I was trying to hurt you. Why? Because I was hurting, and misery loves company, I guess. That's not a relationship, Juliana. That's just two people tearing each other down. I know it is. I want to do better. I want us to. So do I. But wanting isn't enough. We need to actually change the patterns that brought us here. How do we do that? I don't know yet, but I think we need help. Professional help. A therapist who can help us understand what went wrong and how to build something healthier. I'm willing to try, whatever it takes. Okay, I'll look into options when I get back. When are you coming back? A few more days. I need a little more time to process everything. I miss you. I miss you too. But I needed to know that you were capable of missing me, that you actually wanted me to come home. Of course I want you to come home. This house is empty without you. It's been empty for a while, Juliana. We just didn't notice because we were both here. I drove back to Philadelphia on a Sunday afternoon, 2.5 weeks after I had left. The time alone had been transformative, not because I had reached any grand conclusions, but because I had rediscovered parts of myself that had been submerged for years. Juliana was waiting when I arrived, standing on the front porch like a sentinel despite the cold. She looked different than I remembered, smaller somehow, less formidable, more human. The armor she typically wore to face the world was absent, replaced by invulnerability I hadn't seen since early in our relationship. You're back, she said, stating the obvious the way people do when words feel inadequate. I'm back. Can I hug you? The question struck me as both touching and sad. My wife was asking permission to embrace me, a sign of how far we had drifted that physical affection now required negotiation. Yes. The hug was awkward at first. Two people relearning a language they had once spoken fluently, but it deepened, became something real, and when we finally separated, I saw tears on Juliana's face. I'm so sorry, she said. I'm so sorry. I know. I don't know how to make it right. Neither do I. But we can try to figure it out together. The first week was difficult, full of conversations that circled the same territory, apologies that felt insufficient, attempts to resume normalcy that kept running into walls. But we were talking, really talking, in ways we hadn't for years. The crisis had broken something open, and what emerged was messy, but honest. We found a couples therapist, Dr. Maureen Kessler, who came highly recommended and had an opening in her schedule. Our first session was scheduled for the following week, giving us time to establish what we wanted to address. The contempt, I said when Juliana asked what I wanted to work on. The underlying disrespect that's been building for years. If we can't fix that, nothing else matters. And what about what you want to work on for yourself? I have plenty of issues, but so do you. I know. I want to work on being more assertive about my needs, on not accommodating to the point where I lose myself, on actually communicating when something bothers me instead of swallowing it and pretending everything's fine. That's been a problem for years. I thought I was being easygoing, but I was really just avoiding conflict. The result is that I stopped advocating for myself, and you stopped seeing me as someone whose needs mattered. Your needs do matter. Then we need to rebuild this marriage in a way that reflects that. Both of our needs, not just yours. The conversation was one of many small building blocks in the reconstruction project that our marriage had become. Not every conversation went smoothly. There were setbacks, arguments, moments when it seemed like the damage was too great to repair. But we kept trying, kept showing up, kept choosing each other over the easier path of giving up. Dr. Kessler proved invaluable. She had a way of identifying patterns we couldn't see ourselves, of reframing conflicts in ways that made them addressable, of holding us both accountable for the behaviors that were damaging our relationship. Juliana, when you dismissed Tobias's career, what are you really saying? She asked during one session. I don't know. That I wish things were different? Different how? I guess. I wish he had more ambition, more drive to achieve. And what does achievement mean to you? Success, recognition, financial security. Tobias has achieved 20 years of dedicated service to education. He has recognition from his students and colleagues, and while his salary may be lower than yours, you're financially secure together. Why doesn't that count as achievement? Juliana was quiet for a long moment. Because it's not how my family measures success. It's not how my colleagues measure it. It's not what I grew up believing mattered. So you're measuring Tobias against a standard he never agreed to. A standard that contradicts the values he explicitly chose when he became a teacher. I guess I am. That fair? No, it's not. The breakthroughs came slowly, but they came. Juliana began to examine the beliefs she had absorbed from her family and professional environment. Beliefs about success and worth that had poisoned her view of me without her conscious awareness. I began to assert my needs more clearly, to push back against dismissiveness instead of absorbing it, to advocate for myself in ways I had neglected for years. 3 months after my return, something shifted. We were sitting at dinner, a dinner I had cooked, as I always, when Juliana said something that made me stop mid-bite. I'm proud of you. What? I'm proud of you, of who you are, of what you do. I know I haven't said that enough, or at all, lately, but I want you to know. What brought this on? I was at a networking event today, listening to all these people brag about their accomplishments, their bonuses, their corner offices, and I thought about you, about how you never brag, never need external validation, never define yourself by what other people think, and I realized that takes more strength than anything those people in that room had. Juliana, let me finish. I was wrong about you. I've been wrong for a long time. You're not useless. You're the opposite of useless. You're a man who chose meaning over money, who impacts hundreds of lives every year, who stayed committed to something bigger than his own advancement. That's not trash. That's extraordinary. I set down my fork, my appetite suddenly irrelevant compared to what was happening. Do you mean that? I mean every word, and I'm sorry it took almost losing you for me to see it. Almost losing me? Those 2 weeks when you were gone, they were the longest of my life. I kept thinking about what it would be like if you never came back. If I had to live in this house alone, knowing I had driven away the best person I've ever known with my stupid, status-obsessed cruelty. You were thinking about losing me? Every day, every night, I barely slept, barely ate. All I could think about was how badly I had mistreated you and whether I would get the chance to make it right. This was what I had needed to hear. Not just the apology. Apologies were easy. What I needed was evidence that my absence had mattered, that my presence had value beyond the functions I performed. Juliana's grief during those 2 weeks proved something her words alone could not. I'm not going anywhere, I said. Promise? I promise. But I need something from you too. Anything. I need you to keep seeing me, really seeing me, not the version your mother's standards create. I need to know that when you look at me, you see someone worthy of respect. Not despite my choices, but because of them. I'm learning to see that. It's not automatic yet. The old patterns are still there, but I'm learning. That's all I'm asking. The months that followed were a slow reconstruction. Each day bringing small victories and occasional setbacks in our effort to build something healthier than what we had before. Juliana began setting boundaries with her mother, a development I hadn't expected but deeply appreciated. The conversations about my inadequacy stopped, replaced by clear statements that criticism of her husband was not welcome. Lucinda pushed back initially, but eventually accepted the new term, though I suspected her private opinions remained unchanged. She's never going to see you the way I've learned to see you, Juliana. Her values are too fixed, but she doesn't have to. What matters is how I see you, and how do you see me now? As my husband, as my partner, as the man I want to spend the rest of my life with, not because of what you earn, but because of who you are. The therapy continued, evolving as our needs evolve. We moved from crisis management to relationship building, learning communication techniques and conflict resolution strategies that we had never acquired naturally. Dr. Kessler helped us understand the patterns we had fallen into, my accommodation, Juliana's dismissiveness, and develop alternatives that served us both better. My own individual therapy, which I had started after returning from the cabin, helped me understand why I had tolerated disrespect for so long. The roots went deep, to a childhood where harmony was valued above everything, where expressing needs was discouraged as selfish, where accommodation was praised as virtue rather than recognized as survival strategy. You learned to make yourself small, my therapist Dr. Arthur Reyes observed, to diminish your own needs so others wouldn't feel threatened. But relationships can't thrive when one person consistently erases themselves. I thought I was being easygoing. Easygoing is being flexible. What you were doing was disappearing. There's a difference. The insight was uncomfortable, but necessary. I had contributed to my own mistreatment by failing to establish boundaries, failing to advocate for myself, failing to communicate when things bothered me. Juliana bore responsibility for her contempt, but I bore responsibility for accepting it without protest. Change didn't come easily. After years of accommodation, learning to assert myself felt awkward, sometimes aggressive, but gradually, I found a balance, a way to communicate my needs clearly without attacking or withdrawing. That bothered me. I would say, when Juliana made a dismissive comment. I need you to recognize that my perspective is valid, even if you disagree. The first few times, Juliana was defensive, but as the pattern established itself, she learned to receive my feedback without interpreting it as attack. We developed a language for navigating conflict that was foreign to both of us, but increasingly comfortable with practice. 6 months after my return, we took a trip together, a weekend in Vermont, to the town where we had purchased that kitchen clock during our honeymoon. The trip was Juliana's, a symbolic gesture toward recapturing something from the early years of our marriage. I was so hopeful as we walked through the small downtown, so excited about the future we were going to build together. What happened to that hope? I don't know. Life happened, work happened. My mother's voice got louder in my head. I stopped seeing what we had and started focusing on what we didn't have. And now? Now I'm trying to see clearly again, to appreciate what we've built instead of measuring it against some imaginary standard. Is it working? Most days. Some days are harder than others. But I'm trying. That's all I'm asking. We returned from Vermont with a renewed commitment to intentionality, to regularly connecting, regularly communicating, regularly choosing each other over the 1,000 distractions that compete for attention in modern life. The patterns of neglect that had characterized our marriage were being replaced, slowly but surely, by patterns of engagement. The breakthrough came on an ordinary Tuesday, 8 months after that devastating conversation in our kitchen. I had come home from work later than usual. Parent-teacher conferences had run long, to find Juliana preparing dinner. She was cooking. In 14 years of marriage, Juliana had prepared dinner perhaps a dozen times, and never without significant prompting or special occasion. Cooking had been my domain, a function I performed automatically while she focused on her career. "What's this?" I asked, setting down my dinner. "I thought you might like to come home to something for once, instead of always being the one providing it." "You cooked?" "I followed a recipe. Whether it qualifies as cooking is debatable." She smiled, and there was vulnerability in the expression. The fear of failure, the hope for appreciation. I wanted to do something that showed I see all the things you do that I've taken for. I walked to where she stood by the stove and wrapped my arms around from behind. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You haven't tasted it." "I'm not thanking you for the food. I'm thanking you for seeing me." The dinner was mediocre. Overcooked pasta, under-seasoned sauce. But it was the best meal I had eaten in months. Not because of its quality, but because of what it represented, a shift in the assumptions that had governed our relationship. Later that evening, as we sat together on the couch, Juliana said something that marked a turning point. "I've been thinking about what you said about how my love doesn't count if it comes with contempt. What about it? You were right. Love isn't just a feeling, it's how you treat someone. And I treated you terribly for years. I told myself I loved you while simultaneously treating you like you were less than. That's not love, that's possession. It's not that simple, isn't it? I wanted you around because you were useful. You cooked, you managed the house, you were stable and reliable. But I didn't value you as a person. I valued you as a function. That's the opposite of love. People's feelings are more complicated than that. Maybe. But behavior isn't. And my behavior told you that your feelings didn't matter. That your contributions weren't valued. That you were lucky to be with someone like me. That's contempt, not love. And I'm deeply ashamed of it. Why are you bringing this up now? Because I want you to know that I understand. Really understand. Not just intellectually. I felt something shift to some barrier I'd been maintaining without knowing it. And suddenly I could see, really see, what I had been doing to you, to us. And what did you see? I saw a man who loved me unconditionally, who gave everything he had to our marriage, who never complained when I dismissed his contributions or minimized his work. I saw someone who deserved so much better than what I was giving. And I saw myself, someone who had become everything I used to hate about my mother. That comparison startled me. Juliana had always maintained a complicated relationship with Lucinda, simultaneously seeking her approval and resenting her judgment. Seeing herself as her mother was clearly painful. "You're not your mother," I said. I was becoming her. The contempt, the measuring of worth by external standards, the inability to see value in anything that didn't match my expectations. I was turning into exactly what I swore I would never be. But you caught it. You're changing. Because of you. Because you left. And it forced me to see what I was losing. If you had stayed, if you had kept accommodating, I would have kept taking you for granted. Your leaving saved me from becoming someone I couldn't live with. So we're both better because of the worst moment of our marriage. Strange how that works, isn't it? Not strange, just human. We don't change until we have to. And sometimes the only thing that forces change is crisis. The understanding deepened over time. Each conversation adding layers to our comprehension of what had gone wrong and how to prevent it from recurring. Juliana began to examine her relationship with her mother more critically. In therapy, she explored how Lucinda's values had shaped her own, how the constant measuring against impossible standards had created anxiety that she then projected onto me. I was never good enough for her, Juliana said during one session. No matter what I achieved, she always found something lacking. So I learned to do the same thing to others, to always find the flaw, the inadequacy, the ways people fell short. And Tobias became a target for that pattern, Dr. Kessler, the primary target, because he was closest, because I knew he wouldn't leave, because I felt safe being my worst self with. How does that feel, Tobias? Hearing that you were targeted because you felt safe. Complicated. Part of me understands. I know that people often hurt the ones they feel safest with, but another part is angry. My safety shouldn't have made me a target. My reliability shouldn't have been punished. You're right, Juliana said. It shouldn't have, and I'm sorry it was. The conversations weren't always productive. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns reasserted themselves, conflicts that felt like returns to the dysfunction we were trying to escape. But we had tools now, the language and strategies Dr. Kessler had taught us, and we used them to navigate disagreements that would previously have escalated to contempt. I'm feeling dismissed right now, I would say when Juliana's tone shifted. I hear that. I didn't mean to be dismissive. Can we start over? The script was artificial at first, but it became natural with practice. We were learning a new way of being together, one where both parties were responsible for maintaining respect, where conflict was addressed rather than avoided, where love was expressed through behavior as much as words. My own growth continued alongside our marital work. I became more comfortable asserting my needs, more willing to speak up when something bothered me, more capable of recognizing when accommodation had crossed into self-erasure. You seem different, my colleague mentioned one day at school. More confident, more present. I've been working on something. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You seem happier than I've seen you in years. The observation confirmed what I had been sensing. The crisis of my marriage had catalyzed growth that extended beyond the relationship itself. I was becoming a better version of myself, more integrated, more self-aware, more willing to take up space in my own. A year after that devastating conversation in the kitchen, Juliana and I sat down to assess where we've come a long way, she said. We have. Do you think we've made it? We're through the worst? I don't think relationships work that. There's no finish line you can stop trying. But I think we've built something more sustainable than what we had before. More sustainable how? More honest, more mutual, more based on actual respect rather than assumptions and tolerance. The marriage we have now isn't the same as the marriage that almost destroyed us. It's something new, something better. I think so, don't you? I think so too. I just wanted to make sure you felt the same way. 15 months after my return from the cabin, Juliana received news that forced us to test the resilience of what we had built. Lucinda was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. The call came on a Saturday morning, disrupting a quiet weekend we had planned together. I watched Juliana's face as she absorbed the information, saw the complex emotions playing across her features, fear, grief, and something else I couldn't immediately identify. My mother has cancer, she said after hanging. I heard. I'm so sorry. She starts treatment next week. She's terrified. Of course she is. How are you feeling? I don't know. I should feel devastated. She's my mother. But all I can think about is how she's treated you, treated us, for years. And I feel guilty for not being able to separate that from the fact that she might be dying. The honesty was striking. A year ago, Juliana wouldn't have acknowledged such complicated feelings. She would have suppressed them under the weight of what she thought she should feel. The fact that she could name the complexity was evidence of how much she had grown. Those feelings can coexist, I said. You can be angry at someone and still grieve them. You can recognize their flaws and still love them. Will you come with me to see her? She's asked for both of us. Both of us. She specifically asked for you. I don't know why. I went, despite my reservations. Whatever Lucinda had done, whatever role she had played in poisoning my marriage, she was still my wife's mother, still a human being facing mortality. The woman I found in the hospital was not the formidable figure who had dismissed me for 14 years. She was small in the bed, her hair already thinning from preliminary treatments, her eyes carrying a vulnerability I had never seen. Tobias, she said when I entered, thank you for coming. Of course. I asked for you specifically because I need to say something. She paused, gathering strength. I've been cruel to you for years. I told my daughter she had married beneath her, told her she should expect more, told her you were a disappointment, and I was wrong. The apology was so unexpected that I didn't know how to respond. These past few months, Lucinda continued, watching Juliana almost lose you, watching her fight to save her marriage, I've had to examine myself, and I didn't like what I saw. I judged you by standards that don't actually matter. I measured your worth in dollars and status when I should have measured it in character and kindness. Lucinda, let me finish. I'm facing my mortality now, and it clarifies things. All the achievements I pushed for, all the status I valued, none of it means anything when you're lying in a hospital bed wondering if you'll see another year. What matters is the people who love you, who show up for you, who care about you as a person, rather than a position. You're going to beat this. Maybe. or maybe not, but either way, I wanted you to know that I see you differently. I see a man who stayed when my daughter gave him every reason to leave. A man who fought for his marriage when a lesser person would have walked away. A man who loved my daughter enough to forgive behavior that was unforgivable. I appreciate you saying that. I'm not saying it for your appreciation. I'm saying it because it's true, and because I may not have another chance to say it. Juliana was crying by this point, watching the exchange between her husband and mother with an expression of disbelief. The two people who had been most at odds throughout her marriage were finding common ground in the shadow of mortality. We stayed with Lucinda for several hours, the conversation ranging from practical matters to emotional. The diagnosis was serious, but not hopeless. The oncologist had outlined a treatment plan that offered reasonable odds, but the confrontation with mortality had changed something in Lucinda, stripped away pretenses and defenses that had defined her personality for decades. She apologized to you, Juliana said on the drive home. I never thought I'd see that. Neither did I. Does it change anything? I don't know. It doesn't erase years of contempt, but it suggests she's capable of growth, even at her age. That's something. What do we do now? We support her through treatment, we maintain the boundaries we've established, and we see what kind of relationship is possible now that she's willing to see me differently. You'd be willing to try? After everything she put you through? People can change, Juliana. You changed. I changed. Maybe your mother can too. Lucinda's illness became a catalyst for unexpected transformation. Her treatment was successful. The cancer responded well, and within 6 months she was in remission. But the experience left her permanently. The woman who emerged from treatment was softer, more reflective, less driven by the status obsession that defined her adult life. She sold the large house she had maintained for decades, moving to a smaller place that she could manage. She reduced her involvement in the social organizations that had consumed her time, focusing instead on relationships that actually mattered. And she made genuine efforts to rebuild her relationship with me. I know I can't undo years of damage, she said during one of our conversations. But I want you to know that I see you now. Really see you. Not the disappointing son-in-law I had constructed in my mind. What do you see? A good man, a steady presence in my daughter's life. Someone who has brought out the best in her while tolerating her worst. She paused. I see the man I should have seen all along. The reconciliation wasn't complete. Some wounds run too deep for full healing, but it was real. Lucinda became a presence in our lives rather than a source of tension. Someone we could visit without dreading the subtle judgments that used to accompany every interaction. Juliana observed the change with a mixture of gratitude and grief. I spent 30 years trying to earn her approval, she told me. Trying to meet standards that kept shifting. Trying to be good enough for someone who was never satisfied. And now, when she finally sees value in what we have, I don't know how to feel. You can feel however you feel. There's no right answer. Part of me is relieved. Part of me is angry that it took cancer to change her perspective. And part of me wishes I had pushed back earlier, had refused to accept her judgment of us, of our life together. Would pushing back have changed anything? I don't know. Probably not. She wasn't capable of seeing differently until she was forced to. Then you did what you could with what you had. That's all anyone can. The evolution of our family dynamic had broader effects. Without Lucinda's constant criticism as a backdrop, Juliana's remaining tendencies toward dismissiveness had less fuel to sustain them. The voice in her head that had measured everything against impossible standards grew quieter, replaced by perspectives she had developed in therapy and cultivated in our marriage. 2 years after that devastating conversation in our kitchen, we had achieved something I hadn't been sure was possible: a genuinely healthy marriage. Not perfect, no marriage is, but functional in ways that the previous version had never been. We communicated honestly about our feelings. We respected each other's contributions regardless of their financial value. We addressed conflicts directly, rather than letting them fester. We showed up for each other in ways that demonstrated love through action, rather than merely words. We should renew our vows, Juliana suggested one evening. Renew them? The vows we made 14 years ago were made by different people. People who didn't understand what marriage actually required, who thought love would be enough without the work. I want to make new vows. Ones that reflect who we've become and what we've learned. That's a beautiful idea. Will you do it? Will you marry me again? I married you the first time without understanding what I was getting into. Now I know exactly what I'm getting into, and I want it more than I did then. Is that a yes? It's an absolute. The ceremony was small, just family and a few close friends, gathered in the backyard of our home on a spring afternoon 2.5 years after I had walked out the door. We had written our own vows, reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this moment. Juliana went first, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. Tobias, 14 years ago, I promised to love you. I kept that promise in words, but not always in actions. I said I loved you while treating you as less than. I claimed to cherish you while failing to see your worth. I vowed to honor you while allowing contempt to poison our home. Today, I make different promises. I promise to see you clearly, not through the lens of external standards, but for who you actually are. I promise to value your contribution, your career, your choices, not despite their distance from conventional success, but because of the meaning they represent. I promise to speak to you with the respect you deserve, even when I'm stressed, even when I'm scared, even when it would be easier to lash out. I promise to be the wife I should have been all along, not perfect, because perfection isn't possible, but intentional, committed to your well-being as much as my own, dedicated to building something together that neither of us could build alone. I love you, Tobias, not because of what you provide or what you achieve. I love you because of who you are, and I'm grateful every day that you chose to give me another chance. Then it was my turn. Juliana, 14 years ago, I thought love meant endless accommodation. I thought being a good husband meant erasing myself, my needs, my preferences, in favor of whatever would keep the peace. I thought sacrifice was the same as devotion, and I sacrificed my own well-being on the altar of a harmony that was never real. Today, I make different promises. I promise to be present, not just physically, but emotionally, to tell you when something bothers me instead of swallowing it, to advocate for my needs as well as yours, to be a full partner, rather than a supporting character in a story about someone else. I promise to respect you while also respecting myself, to love you without losing myself in that love, to build with you a relationship where both parties are seen, valued, and heard. I promise to stay when it's hard, not out of fear or obligation, but because I've chosen you, because the work we've done together has created something worth fighting for, because the person you've become is someone I want to spend the rest of my life with. I love you, Julia, not the person I once imagined you, but the person you actually are, and I'm committed to learning more about that person every day we have together. The officiant pronounced us renewed. We kissed to applause from the small gathering. My brother Nathan was there with his family. Juliana's college roommate had flown in from Seattle. A few colleagues from both our workplaces stood witness to the moment, and in the front row, Lucinda sat with tears streaming down her face. Tears of joy rather than criticism, appreciation rather than judgment. Later, during the small reception we had arranged, she approached me. "That was beautiful," she said. "The vows, the ceremony, all of it. Thank you. I know I don't deserve to be part of this. After everything I did to undermine your marriage, I shouldn't get to witness you putting it back together. People make mistakes. What matters is whether they grow from them. Have I grown enough to be forgiven? You're here, aren't you? Juliana invited you. I agreed. That's not nothing. But is it forgiveness?" I considered the question carefully. Forgiveness isn't an event, it's a process. I'm working on it. Some days are easier than others, but I'm committed to the work because holding on to anger doesn't serve anyone, least of all me. That's more than I deserve, maybe, but it's what I'm offering. 3 years after Juliana told me I was useless, I stood in the kitchen of our home, preparing dinner as I had done thousands of times before. The routine was familiar, but everything else had changed. Juliana was working at the table, laptop open, occasionally looking up to share something from her day. The contempt that had once colored her observations was gone, replaced by genuine partnership. She consulted me on decisions, valued my perspective, treated me as an equal rather than a subordinate. "How was your day?" he asked, a question that had become meaningful rather than perfunctory. "Good. I had a breakthrough with a student who's been struggling. He finally got the Fitzgerald analysis we've been working on." "That's wonderful. You have such a gift for reaching the difficult kids." "It's not a gift. It's 22 years of practice. Skill developed through dedication is more impressive than natural talent. I've come to understand that." The observation would have been impossible 3 years ago. Juliana had been unable to see value in anything that couldn't be measured against external metrics. Now she saw it clearly, and her seeing had transformed our relationship. We ate dinner together, talking about everything and nothing in the way that healthy couples do. The conversation was easy, but not superficial, covering work challenges and family updates, and the small concerns that fill a shared life. After dinner, we sat on the back porch, watching the sun set over the neighborhood we had called home for over a decade. "I think about that night sometimes," Juliana said. "The night I said those terrible things. I think about it too. Does it still hurt?" "Sometimes. The wounds have healed, but the scars remain. I don't think I'll ever completely forget what it felt like to be called useless by the person I loved most. I wish I could take it back. I know you do. But in a strange way, I'm glad it happened. Not glad for the pain. I'd never wish that on anyone. But glad because it forced us to confront what wasn't working. Without that crisis, we might have continued for years in a marriage that was slowly poisoning both of us." "Do you really believe that?" "I do. Sometimes destruction is necessary for rebuilding. We had to tear down what wasn't working before we could build something better. And is this better? What we have now? Infinitely better. We're partners now in a way we never were before. We see each other. We value each other. We treat each other with the respect that love requires. Juliana reached over and took my hand. Thank you for not giving up on us, for leaving when you needed to, but also for coming back, for believing that change was possible. Thank you for changing, for doing the work, even when it was painful, for becoming someone I can trust with my heart. We sat in silence, watching the colors shift in the sky, feeling the particular peace that comes from surviving something difficult and emerging stronger. The marriage we had now was not the marriage we had started with. It was something forged in crisis, tempered by effort, built on foundations of hard-won understanding. It would require ongoing maintenance. All marriages do, but it was sustainable in ways the previous version had never been. I thought about the kitchen clock, the one we had purchased in Vermont during our honeymoon. It still hung on the wall, still ticked away the seconds, still marked the passage of time in a home that had transformed around it. We had considered replacing it. It was outdated, didn't match the kitchen's current decor, but Juliana had insisted on keeping it. It reminds me of who we were, she said, of where we started. I don't want to forget that, even as we become something different. The clock had witnessed everything, the early years of hope, the gradual erosion, the devastating conversation, my departure, my return, the slow reconstruction. It had kept time through all of it, marking seconds that had accumulated into years, moments that had built a life. I looked at Juliana, my wife, my partner, the woman who had learned to see me after years of blindness, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, complete contentment. She had called me useless. She had called me trash. She had begged me to return when she realized what she was losing, and somehow, through the pain and the work and the commitment to growth, we had found our way to something real, something honest, something worth all the struggle it had taken to achieve. The future stretched before us, uncertain as all futures are, but filled with possibility. We had survived the worst version of ourselves. Whatever came next, we would face it together, not as the people we had been, but as the people we had chosen to become.